Hey, welcome to Draw Tip Tuesday. I have been playing with gouache lately. I am learning how to use the medium and I'm learning how to paint. So I am a beginner basically, and hopefully that's okay with you. Maybe you just want to tag along and try a little bit of painting with me today. Gouache basically is watercolor. The only difference is that it is opaque. Or actually, that's not the only difference, but it's opaque watercolor. And when you use watercolor and then you let it dry and paint on top, the first layer won't be affected at all. With gouache though, if you add another wet layer, the first layer of paint is reactivated. So that is something to keep in mind. Anything else about gouache? Yes, it dries up a little bit chalky and matte, and you can make it look sort of flat, which I really like. And I think because it's easy to handle and it's fun to work with, it's very popular with illustrators. I think it's also better to scan than watercolors because they can be very light and sort of subtle. So that's all I know so far about gouache. Maybe I am too much of a beginner to actually do a whole Draw Tip Tuesday video about it, but you know what? I just love sharing what I learn, so this is it. I am using a very basic set of tube paint from Reeves. I deliberately limit my palette to only the 3 primary colors and white, which is quite important for opacity when using gouache. With those 3, yellow, red and blue, I can mix any color and it will keep things simple while I am getting to know the material. As I go, I will discover what I like about the paint and what I don't like and what I am missing in my palette. And then I can add colors, or I can go and explore brands, all that. I just start with the basics. I am mixing an orange in order to get to know the colors a little bit better. Before sitting down for this video, I did some grocery shopping and bought carrots and tomatoes and some other vegetables. So those are on top of my mind, and also they are great shapes to paint from imagination. You can't really go wrong, can you? That first carrot is a bit too red, but now that the paint is still wet, it's no problem, I can change it. With gouache, you are always looking for the paint to be wet enough to glide over the page, but also have a certain thickness. When you add too much water, it's almost like working with watercolor, which actually is the great thing about this paint. It's very versatile. I like how you can make smooth transitions in color while the paint is still wet on the paper. You can also wait for the first layer to dry and then add another layer, for example a darker orange, to add some shading and depth. These carrots definitely need some green. I'm keeping it simple, I'm just exploring the medium. Let's use some of that bright red, straight from the tube, and paint some tomatoes. I'm trying to limit the streakiness because I want it to be a flat color, but I think that is actually also something to explore further with different brushes. This brush that I'm using is pretty worn and old and is kind of bristly and sturdy, so it might have a different effect than a softer flat brush. So I am making a note to self here to experiment some more with the various brushes that I have. When it comes to brushes, use synthetic ones. Soft watercolor brushes are often made of animal hair and hold more water, which is exactly what you need when watercoloring, but not necessarily for gouache. The first layer of orange has now dried, and I'd like to see the effect of adding a darker orange on top on one side. I feel it's a bit too hard on the edges, and I soften it a bit by adding a mix of orange that is just a bit lighter again. When you are adding a second layer, make sure that you use a little bit thicker paint, so a little bit less water, so that you don't dilute the first layer. Gouache paint will be reactivated when you wet it. Adding the green crowns on the tomatoes makes the whole difference for the red circles that I drew. I'll also give the tomato skins a nice shine by adding a white highlight. I actually haven't used my white much at all. With other subjects that I have been painting so far, I kept adding whites to create many exciting shapes of one color. I was even afraid I would run out of white. But today it's all primaries. I guess painting always has an element of surprise. Right now I feel like there's something missing. Some contrast maybe, perhaps line. So I will take out my Uniball rollerball pen and add some drawing elements. Not sure what I'm doing and not sure if I will like the result. But hey, when you are exploring, you just need to take some risks. That thin line feels a little thin. And also I am just too impatient for all the paint to completely dry. And I cannot put that rollerball on top of wet paint. So I bring in my Pentel brush pen with black ink. The tip of this pen is a brush, so you can create really nice painterly organic lines with it. I think this now really brings in the contrast and playfulness that I was looking for. Well, I had fun. Carrots and tomatoes. I love it on my plate, in my sketchbook, anywhere, anytime. Anyway, you can do whatever you like, of course, but I think drawing or painting a pattern like this and just playing with combining different elements and maybe adding a pen or something, that just really teaches you more about the medium and you get more acquainted with it. And the next time you're like, okay, maybe I should have a little bit of thicker paint on top, or maybe I can try to see what happens if I add white, whatever. So it's all about experimentation. It's all an exploration. I hope you will do some exploring too. And if you don't have gouache, just have some fun with your watercolors or your crayons or anything other colorful. And if you don't want to miss out on the weekly Draw Tip Tuesday videos, then subscribe to this channel. I'll see you next week. Bye!